So it makes sense to me that young people in 2026 are wanting to emulate the 2000s. Y2K is back in style. 2000 fashions have come back in style. Young people are going analog, getting dumb phones. Nostalgia is in, but it's really nothing new. As a matter of fact, back in the 2000s, when we were in our 20s, the 70s made a comeback, the decade in which most of me and my friends were born. Studio 54 made a huge comeback. There are all these stories and documentaries about Studio 54. Bell bottoms came back in style. Platform shoes came back in style. Movies and TV shows about the 70s were back in fashion. And disco music made a huge comeback. Even such films as The Last Days of Disco were very popular. I know I loved the movie and I loved the soundtrack that went along with the movie. It was great. And even disco queen Donna Summers came back in style. She did this VH1 special or something 20 years later. I became obsessed with Donna Summers. I still am today. So nostalgia is nothing new. In 2026, they're wanting to emulate the 2000s. And like I said, in the 2000s, we wanted to emulate the 70s. But why does it feel like now we're just being inundated with the past? And why is it just so invasive now? And have you guys had your fill of all the 80s and 90s and 2000s reboots and remakes and remasters? Because I've had my fill and I'm tired of it. I am so sick and tired of Hollywood just recycling old material over and over again. And a lot of movies, honestly, I feel like don't need to be touched or remade. Leave them alone. Leave them where they're at. Let's create something new. Let's get something fresh from maybe the younger generation. But now even Gen Z is obsessed with the 90s and the 2000s. They're so obsessed, in fact, that nostalgia is now being described as toxic. And I want to talk about why. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. On this channel, we talk about today's trending topics or whatever happens to be on my mind. Either way, I am so glad that you're here. Now let's just get right into toxic nostalgia.
A painful longing for a place you cannot fully return to. And once you understand that, nostalgia starts to look different. You may not only miss that time, you may miss who you were before certain things happened, before the pressure, before the responsibility, and before the big loss, before life became heavier. And this is where nostalgia gets powerful, because memory does not bring back the whole past. It brings back select pieces, that song or that house or the person or that one big summer, the version of you that felt more open. But the mind can quietly edit out the parts that were confusing, lonely, or painful. So the past starts to feel cleaner than it actually was.
I feel like he makes such an interesting point here, especially when he talks about how the past is preserved in pieces. Because I myself have collected so many photos. They're just in boxes. If you could see here to the left of me, I literally have stacked up in a closet here these plastic bins full of stacks of photos and albums and so much memorabilia that I just recently, just a few years ago, I was proud of myself. I started throwing things away. I had to let go of stuff. I just got to let go. You can't keep everything. But I'm someone who is very nostalgic. So like he said, I am guilty of collecting my life in pieces. That's how you kind of put this picture together of the past, which combined together creates a clean, happy version of the past, doing away with all the bad stuff. And I want to talk about the ways that this kind of nostalgia can actually be harmful.
By spending all of your time talking about the past and how it was better, you are by definition sending your brain a signal to tell it that your best days are behind you. And if you tell your brain that, they will be behind you. You need to start living in the present. You need to embrace what's now and what's in front of you. Stop drowning in nostalgia. It's a drug, just like anything else, and it holds you back. Living in the past creates depression.
So, by consuming too much nostalgia, you can create this more cleaned up version of the past. And if you keep telling yourself that the past was better than the present, you do begin to kind of hate the present day of which you're currently living in. So there's really no other choice for you other than being depressed. And you're not making new memories. You're not making new art. You're not evolving. Even collectively as a culture, we've kind of stopped evolving and moving forward, especially with art and creativity, movies, music, film. And it seems like we're all just kind of stuck in the past.
The writer and academic Mark Fisher notes that, quote, there's an increasing sense that culture has lost the ability to grasp and articulate the present because the idea of a future existing seems nonsensical.
So what I found interesting there was how she said that this idea of a future seems nonsensical. I assume that to mean that people no longer have a vision for the future, or they don't want to even imagine what the future will be. You guys drop down in the comments and let me know what you all think about that.
So I think that makes sense for a lot of people. Of course, you're going to look backwards if the forwards is not guaranteed. But here's where it gets kind of icky with all the various remakes and the prequels and the sequels and everything. It's been used to pacify and in turn monetize consumers' genuine feelings of discomfort and anger at the state of the world.
Interesting. I look at so many of these remakes as just a simple cash grab. Hollywood just wants to use more tried and true methods of entertainment rather than taking a risk on something that is new and creative. But our perspective does go a bit deeper in how the use of nostalgia by the entertainment industry is just a way of playing on our worst fears and emotions in order to make money. I can definitely agree with that. But let me know what you guys think.
What does it mean to grow up in a world that has not only robbed you of stability, but routinely uses media to stunt your transition from adolescence to adulthood and asks you to depoliticize yourself in order to engage with it? These brands are taking nostalgia, which is something they know that we are clinging to because the future is unknown or is disastrous, and they're just giving us like the soft, nice, easy parts of it in the hopes that we won't remember that other shitty stuff happened then.
So she said that selling the younger generation so much nostalgia can stunt their transition into adulthood. Because I've been wondering, why would Gen Z be so nostalgic for a time that they never even lived in? And I really think that the younger generation, the damage that it can do to the younger generation is if they are not focused on themselves at a time when they should be focused on, like she said, transitioning into adulthood and figuring out who they are. If they're so lost in 90s and 2000s and looking back to a different time, a different era, then that means that they're not focusing on themselves and their own growth and their own development and what makes them unique. And the things that are important for, you know, them to have a voice and have a say and to express themselves. They're not really, if you're just emulating something from the past, you're not really focusing on finding out who you are and figuring out how to express yourself and have your own voice. I don't know. That's just kind of how I look at it, because I don't really think that it kind of seems like a waste of time for the younger generation to focus so much on the 2000s, especially, or the 90s, which was a time that they never even lived in.
Gen Z is trying to reverse what big tech has done to their brains. And there's a growing appreciation and, dare I say, wistfulness for a time before smartphones existed. Google searches for the keywords 90s movies has doubled since 2015. Sales of physical media like vinyl, CDs, and physical books has been growing. And anecdotally, even on the New York City subway, I see a lot of women reading full-on books on the subway, like tomes. And there's a word for this, anomia. It means longing for a time that you weren't even alive for.
Okay, I love that dance sequence where they were doing the Running Man in the hallway. I had to play that back over and over. That was funny. But no, seriously. I just recently watched a YouTuber talk about her generation, Gen Z, and she talked about how the younger 20-somethings, I guess, or maybe kids in high school are watching our old high school videos from like the 90s and the 2000s. And I was honestly shocked because those are some of my favorite videos. My boyfriend and I will send each other clips and stuff that we see on Instagram and we laugh. Like, we love those videos, but I never in a million years would have thought that somebody who's young now would be watching them. Like, I didn't even think that they would be aware or care that those kind of old camcorder videos existed. I didn't think it would ever even pop up on their feed. I thought that was just something for us, like, you know, older generation or whatever looking back. So I was shocked. I was like, they're watching those? And she was commenting about how Gen Z is watching a lot of those old camcorder videos, and that they're finding them so fascinating. I was like, oh, okay. But I think the reasoning behind why so many younger people are watching those old videos is interesting. It's something I never really even thought about. I think that they just are fascinated by a world that existed and how people existed pre-algorithm and pre-social media.
They have this idea, sort of like an idyll, like there was this pre-digital time when culture wasn't splintered and it wasn't siloed, and they sort of want to go back there. And it's interesting, there are club nights where Gen Z will listen to all this type of music. Faux-stalgia, it's not nostalgia. They weren't there in the first place. It's not like school disco when people used to go and listen to the sort of hits that were around when they were kids. It's almost like a false memory. It's yearning, again, that we talk about. I don't know if you've heard this word that's like a big sort of trend word of 2026, friction maxing. The idea to kind of shun digital convenience and go back to things like vinyl. But the music that comes from these times, they have such a deep suspicion and cynicism, Gen Z, about music from now, because people understand so much of what machines and computers are capable of. And so even manufactured bands from the past, you know, obviously people are put together on a TV show are more authentic than artists now who have come up in a non-manufactured way.
Interesting what she said about the younger generation kind of forming this false memory, while the older generations are cleaning up their memories and making them nicer than they actually were. So we all want to feel warm and comforted by the past, or at least a version of the past. So knowing all of this, what can we do in order to stop all of this nostalgia? Like, how do we change the narrative? How do we begin to have a different discussion about recreating the past, living in the past? We're talking about toxic nostalgia, but again, how can we change and what can we do in order to better deal with present day? Or how can we change a narrative about talking about the future?
I just want a world in which people are brave enough to imagine the future. I think at this point, people are scared to imagine the future. Even when they imagine the future, they imagine it through the lens of the past. But I think at some point, we have to be brave enough to imagine a future. Like, what does the future look like? And I'm not saying it's also very tired to only imagine the negative parts of the future. Right? Like, we're already living in a dystopian narrative. We're already living in a 1984, dystopian horror movie. But I think that it actually is much braver and harder to imagine a positive future, to imagine a positive use of technology, to imagine a positive society, to imagine new music trends, new drum sounds, new bass sounds, just new.
Drop down in the comments and let me know what you all think. How do you feel about toxic nostalgia? Are you the type of person where nostalgia is your go-to when you feel that the world is just sort of dark and depressing? Do you feel like the algorithms are just manipulating us and that corporations are just profiting off of our negativity and giving us a false sense of what the past was really like in order to just sell us entertainment and to continue to feed us content? Be sure to go ahead and share your opinions down below. And if you enjoyed this content, please go ahead and like the video. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys on the next video.